Data science project walkthrough. What we are going to do is we are going to take a simple project, try to understand how it is structured in code base, how it is thought through, and how it is executed. We will see all these. Kindly ensure you watch this video till end. It is going to be very informative. Let's start without any delay. How we are going to go through is we are going to understand flow of a typical data science project. Then we are going to see how the code repo looks like for a typical data science project. Then I'm going to take an example of one project and show you the real code in Python, how the repository is managed. Then I'm going to obviously show you all these steps, but in the end, I'm going to show you what are the different ways of deployment and learn one or two ways of deployment as well. And I'm going to leave you with some way forward learning materials, etc. First of all, what is the flow of a typical data science project? To understand that, we have to understand what will be the things that will be needed to execute a project. So first thing that you will need to execute a project is basically data. So what will be the first entry point of your project flow? That will be basically data import. You need some data, right? Without data, you can't do anything. So you need to import data in your environment. You are working with R or Python or any cloud tools or wherever you are working. You will have to import some data. Once you have imported some data, right? What you need to do is you need to do the basic cleaning and basic pre-processing and basic transformations and basic um, housekeeping activities of the data. So I will say here data clean and transform. What we are doing here, we are trying to outline flow of a normal data science project. Okay, you will import data, you will clean and transform the data. Once you have cleaned and once you have transformed the data, then what you are going to do is you are going to train the model, train the machine learning model. This step, you train the model and you also evaluate the model. So I will add one more step here, train model and evaluate. However you want to evaluate, that depends on you. So different ways of evaluating the model, but I'm simply writing here evaluate model. So training and evaluation can be a two-way process. For example, depending on the evaluation result, you go back and retrain and things like that. So these steps will come. After that, once you have finalized your model, right, then you might want to do some different kind of evaluation, some different kinds of testing that things are fine for your model. But your objective here is deployment. So what you want to do, you want to basically deploy your model in the production environment once you have evaluated and you are happy with the model. So I am saying deploy model. After deployment model, there are 2 3 steps which people don't touch upon much, but I'm going to tell you those 2 3 steps. The first step after deploying the model is obviously you will want to monitor the performance. Okay, so I will say here monitor model. And when you deploy model initially, then this step is very, very important because you will want to monitor the model from various perspective in terms of performance, in terms of how it is working on different sets of data, how it is working in terms of resources performance, and many things are there in this category. Fine. So I'll just make this arrow correct. There were two arrows coming. So I will say monitor, monitor model. Once this step is done, what you would also want to do is time to time you would want to retrain the model. So from monitor model, there could be a retraining coming into the picture. I will just write here retrain, and this retrain will be connected to model deployment and monitoring both. So for example, here from the monitoring model, retraining can be done, and from after you retrain the model, right, you will have to deploy the model one more time. So retrain model. These are the 3 steps here. And after the retraining, right, what you will also want to do post monitoring model as a normal process is logging and record maintenance and seeing the report of your model. So there is a whole avenue here in the logging scenario. So you have to keep in mind importing, cleaning, transforming, training, evaluating, deployment, and then these step 1, 2, and 3 are post deployment that you need to keep in mind. Now, if I have to do all these things right, then I need to arrange my project or I need to arrange my code repo in a particular way. And that way you need to understand here. So what you need to understand is how you will arrange your repository. So I will just write here how your code base will look like in general. So when you are taking a training in data science, these things might not get explained. Let's try to understand how the code base will look like. So first of all, I will create a, for example, src folder, source code I am calling it. In this source code, what I'm going to put, I'm going to put my basically main code of my data pipeline or main code of my model. Then I'm going to create a data folder. What I'm going to put in data folder, I'm going to put my data, obviously. Then I'm going to put my model folder. What I'm going to create in model, I'm going to put my various versions of the model. Then I'm going to create something known as app or UI, depending on what kind of UI or what kind of app I want to deploy my model in. Then I'm going to create logs where I'm going to store my logs. Then I'm going to create something known as ML run, because as I told you, the logging and the running part. So where I'm going to store my logged results, right? That I'm going to create. I'm also going to create some additional files here, which are slightly optional, but good to know. So I will write here some files. I'm also going to have a requirement.txt. Why? In requirement.txt, I will have all my packages that I will need. I'm also going to have a Docker file. Why? Because Docker file is needed if I want to do various kinds of deployment. I want to take my model from one environment to another environment, basically. I also want to have here something known as proc file if I am doing a Heroku kind of deployment, proc file. Okay. I'm also going to have here GitLab ci.yml. So what I mean to say here is GitLab-ci dot GitLab-ci dot yml if I want to implement a CI/CD. Don't get confused. Let's try to understand again from the beginning. As I told you, in my code base, I will be importing data, I will be transforming, I will be training the model, I will be evaluating the model, I will be making prediction, I will be, so all these things need to come somewhere, right? So for example, when I say src folder, in this src folder, inside this folder, right, I can have a I can have a file called import.py or data import.py. What is the job of this? As clear from the name, it will import the data. I can have clean.py or data clean.py. What is the job of this? Cleaning the data. I can have train.py. What is the job of this? Job of this, as it is clear from the name, it is training. I can have retrain.py. What is the job of this? As clear from the name, it will be used to retrain the model. And what else I can have? I can have some additional file for data pre-processing. So I will call that preprocess.py. So whatever source code I need, most important Python files or most useful Python files, I'll put in src folder. After that, in the data folder, what data I should keep here? So the location of data should be, for example, train data.csv. Okay. For example, test data.csv. For example, pre-processed data.csv, whatever data you want to use in your model, that data you can keep storing here, pre-processed data.py. Sorry, not py here. This is data basically. So csv.csv. So you have to understand how the code is modularized and organized. Then only you'll be able to get a feel of it. Source code here, data here. What will get stored in model? So whatever model I have trained, for example, here I will say model underscore random forest underscore version 1. This is my version 1. Model underscore random forest This is my version 2, and so on and so forth in the model folder. What I will store in app and UI folder? Suppose I'm building, I'm deploying in Flask. So I need a file called app.py. I need inside templates folder here. I will need a index.html as well. And if I'm using a Streamlit kind of setup, right, I will need streamlit.py file as well here. Okay. Inside the logs, what I want to have? I want to have some kind of file that will ensure my logs are captured. Inside the ML runs, what I want to store? I want to store something that ensures all my run related data is captured. Requirement.txt, what it will have? It will have all packages needed. All packages needed to run your project. What we will have in Docker file? The Docker file. So what is the use of Docker file? Why Docker is used? That is a separate topic altogether. You have two resources to learn that. If you go to Unfold Data Science and search for Unfold Data Science Docker, you will get a 1 hour video. Please watch that video. And if you want to learn more on Dockers, right, what you have to go do is you have to go to unfolddata-science.com intermediate course, and Docker for beginners is one course here if you see. Okay. If you do this course, right, it's a very cheap price course if you see in $5 only. If you do this course, you will be very comfortable with Dockers. So what is Docker, why it is used, and things like that. So if you are using Docker in your project, then you need to have a Docker file. If you are using a Heroku kind of setup in your project for deployment, you can use Procfile. And if you are using CI/CD, then you can use GitLab ci.yml. I'll come back to this part. Okay. First of all, whatever I explained, let's try to see a real project for this. So all these files we will see. I have already created a project for this. First of all, what is my use case here? My use case here is uh, customer churn for telecom. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to build a churn prediction model. Churn prediction model. What is the job of my model? My job of my model is there are 4 or 5 independent feature, or 6 if I remember it correctly. Those features you gave as input for every customer, and model will tell you whether customer will churn or not churn. For this, I have a sample data which I'll be using. I have taken from Kaggle, and I will show you all these steps. So let's go step by step now, and let's follow this box, basically these boxes, and I will show you how code is arranged. Let's come to Visual Studio. If you see here, there is a project called Churn Prediction Project. I'll explain this. As you can see, I have all those folders that I mentioned you. So for example, here I have SRC folder. In SRC folder, all my source codes are there. For example, you see data ingestion, Kaggle setup because I am taking data from Kaggle, prediction file, pre-processing file, retraining file, training file. So as I told you, whatever Python files we need, I'll put it here in the SRC folders, the main model files. All these are here. I'm going to explain you what these does, but just understand this. After that, what we are going to do is, let's see what is in data folder. So since I have run this project once, so I have already imported the data. This is my churn data basically that I imported from Kaggle. Okay, so in data folder, I am having my churn data, original data, and the pre-processed data on which my model will run. Because I have run it, so pre-processed data has also come. But all in all, in data folder, what you should have is data on which your project is running. Fine. What is there in model folder? In models folder, as you can see, only one version of the model. This is my model. I can have multiple versions. In the app and UI folder, let's see. In the app folder, I'll be deploying this in a Flask app. So I have a template that defines how my page will look like, and I have a app.py. Okay. What I'm going to do in logs and ML runs. As I told you, in logs folder, I have not created anything, but we can store logs. And ML runs is something that comes from a very interesting thing known as ML flow, and that will give you run detail for all your models. Okay, so for example, the accuracy is this much for one run and things like that. So here for all your runs, you can have the data. I have arranged the code like this. And as I told you, you can have requirement.txt, which is here for me, proc file, which is here for me, Docker file, which is here for me, and GitLab ci.yml, which is here for me. Fine. This is the structure that I just explained now. So this way you will see if you open any good projects on GitHub, right? This is the structure you will be seeing it is in. What I should do now is I should show you how I have configured the data import. So we will go step by step from these boxes. What should happen first? Data import. Let's see the data import script. Data import, data import, data import, data ingestion, this one, okay? As you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm saying define a function fetch new data. What to do? Go to Kaggle and download this data. Fine. And when you download this data, store on a zip folder, call zip folder this, and unzip it as well. So if you can see, right, this is the zip folder and this is my data. Because I have run this once, I can rerun this and show you. And once this function returns me that df, then just save it into data folder. So if you see here, in data folder, save it. That's where in the data folder it is saved new churn data. So if I have to rerun this, right, I will just select it and I will try to rerun. Okay. So let me select everything and press run. When it is running, what you will see is it is fetching data from the Kaggle. So if you see here, dataset URL is this, and the data has been fetched from the Kaggle. And this data, new churn data, has come just now. Fine. What to do now is there is a pre-processing step here. Don't worry about what this model does internally. Just see the how the scripts are flowing. Fine. So here, if you see, I'm loading the data, the same data which has been downloaded now. I'm subsetting on some columns here. I'm saying this is my numerical variable and this is my categorical variable. And I'm saying this is my preprocessor. Go and preprocess my data and then transform my data. Once you've done the transformation, then just write the data in preprocessed underscore data.csv. That is this file. So for simplicity, let me go and delete this file and it should get recreated now. Let me delete this file and try to run this script. So what I'm assuming is this will recreate that file. Let's try to do that. So as you can see, okay, I ran the ingestion one more time. I should run the pre-processing actually. So let me try to run pre-processing. Pre-processing done. So you see a new file preprocessed data.txt is created here. In this one, we have folders such as tenure, monthly charges, gender 0 is for female, gender 1 is for male, contract 0 is for 1 year contract, contract 1 is for 2 year contract, and churn is a target variable. This is basically a CSV file that you see here. This is the file which goes for the model training. So if I go to model training, right, train model, you will see that this is a function train model. What it takes as input is pre-processed data and what is my target variable. Two things it takes as input. It will simply create test and train set and it will save model to models folder. So let me go and delete the previous model. Delete this. What should happen if I run the training is in the models folder, a model should come and get saved. Let's try running this now. Control A and run. So model is running now, and in the model folder, I should see a new model. So as you can see, I had deleted this. Now a new model has come. So going back to our this step, right? Import is done, transformation is done, training is done. So what should happen next? Evaluation. Evaluation is also done in that script only. So now our model is ready to be deployed. So let's go and try to deploy the model once. For deployment, what I'm going to use is something known as Flask, and I will do two kinds of deployment. One deployment will be done using Flask, another will be done using Streamlit. Okay. First, let's try to do a Flask deployment. For doing a Flask deployment, inside the app folder, I have a app.py. So this is basically a Flask code. If you want to learn more about how to do a Flask deployment, right? Simply go to YouTube and search Unfold Data Science Flask deployment. You will understand everything about how the Flask deployment is done. It is very simple, nothing difficult to understand. Let me try to run this file actually, this app.py, Python app slash app.py. Okay. When I try to run this, what you will see is a web page will open. So let me try to show you in my browser. A web page like this will open, customer churn prediction. Enter the following details to predict if the customer will churn. So what I can do is I can give some numbers here and it will tell me if customer will churn or not churn. Okay. So 1 and 0. Predict. Customer will not churn. Okay. And whatever values you give here, it will tell you whether customer will churn or not churn. This is basically a Flask deployment. As I told you, if you want to read about Flask deployment, search Unfold Data Science Flask deployment. You will get the code base, you will get all the steps, everything. Anyway, this code also I will share with you, don't worry. So we have done one way of deployment. Let's try to do other way of deployment. Other way of deployment is through a very nice Python package known as Streamlit. So in Streamlit, what you can do is you can simply create a, I'll stop this by Control C. Okay, so this will stop the Flask app and then I will try to do a Streamlit deployment. So in Streamlit, you have to define a web page basically, which I have done here. And what you can do is you can simply say Streamlit run this package. So if you see right, the command I am running is Streamlit run this Streamlit UI.py. Okay, this file I am running Streamlit UI.py. This file I will run and you will see that one more web page will open, which will be slightly different than Flask page. So it says you can now view your Streamlit app here. So this is my app. These are taking some values. I can change the values and you will see that customer is not likely to churn will change. So for example, if I make this to 9, right? Here calculation will happen in the background. For example, if you see here running is coming, right? When I'm changing this, running means calculation is running. Calculation is running. Okay. So if you change anything, that calculation runs and gives you the new result. So this is a slider, this is a select bar, and then running happens means prediction is happening. So we can decide like this: customer is not likely to churn or customer is likely to churn. So these are some of the ways in which you can deploy locally. So what I have done till now, I have done the deployment locally. I have not done any cloud deployment. I have not done any remote deployment. One thing before we go into that area, you can also do a retraining. So for example, come to my retraining script, and this retraining you can run based on what is the approach for retraining. For example, do you want to retrain model every 6 months? Do you want to trigger the retraining based on some conditions, right? Based on that, this retrain pipeline should trigger. And if you see this retrain pipeline, right, it will fetch the new data, it will again subset, and it will use the same preprocessor that we built while training the model, and then it will just retrain. So I can run retraining in front of you. I will just say define this retraining and retrain the model one more time. What will happen when retraining runs is everything will happen right from data fetch to all the pre-processing to retraining. Okay. The right way of doing it is trigger it on something. So something should happen and then retraining should happen. But here for the demo purpose I am showing you, there could be a retraining where all the steps are happening in this function. Data fetch is happening using the data fetch function. Pre-processing is happening. Train model is happening using the train model function. and then retraining is happening. So everything is happening here in this retraining pipeline. So you have to understand how this is working. As I said, this can be called on some action, on some event. Okay. So this retraining is done. Now you have seen all these steps, right from training model to evaluating to deployment in locally. I'm not saying remotely, locally deployment, and monitoring the model is something that you can do, monitoring and logging basically. Deployment locally you have seen. I will just write here. Locally you have seen. Retraining the model is what you have seen. Monitoring and logging, right? There are multiple ways to do this, but one such way of doing it is known as ML flow. Using ML flow, we can do it. As you can see, I have a folder here, ML runs. In these ML runs, I have different entries for different models. So this is the way to uh, do the model ML runs, ML flow. I can create a detailed video. If you want me to do that, drop me a comment saying you want a detailed video on ML flow and I can do this. Fine. Till here, we have done all the steps. The only thing remaining is how to deploy this on cloud. There are multiple ways, or remote server. There are multiple ways in which you can do the deployment on remote server. The very basic and very not so complicated way is this way, Heroku way. You can try that. If you are unsuccessful, you can let me know in comment and I will create a video on how to do Heroku deployment. It's very easy and simple to do this. But if you want to do a production level deployment using CI/CD and using Docker file, right? Then I highly recommend you should go through CI/CD. You should go to Unfold Data Science once and check this GitLab and CI/CD, because if I start explaining you CI/CD here, right, it will take hours together. That is where I have put in this course GitLab CI/CD. You can go here and learn about how CI/CD deployment works. It's a very simple principle, but there are many things to learn here. When you create a code, how it moves, what is Git, what is GitHub, what is CI/CD, how GitLab works together. Many things are here. Those are slightly advanced concepts. You can learn about that. It's not complicated. There is a CI/CD file that you need to create, and then you can use that. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to showcase you how the project structure will look like, how the things will come together and how it will work together. I'm sure you will have many questions. For example, you can ask me data import, who writes the data, who creates the data, right? For the data cleaning and transforming, what is right, what is wrong, how to do, how not to do. Many things can come in all this, but overall, at a high level, this is how the project looks like. This is how your code base will look like. There are different flavors of deployment depending on what you want to do. In any of these areas, in any of these, whatever questions you have in mind, please don't hesitate to drop me in comment and I will create a video based on your response of those. Meanwhile, you can please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. See you all in the next video. Wherever you are, stay safe and take care.